Hi, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt, and welcome to Religion and Life. The beautiful movements and costumes of classical Hindu dance, known as Bharatanatyam, have been described as dance enacting mythology. To help us understand how these dances communicate essential human truths is Sheila Rubin, who has been practicing Bharatanatyam for over 50 years and teaching it for almost 40 years. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you very much.
I'm very excited about having you here today, and one of the main reasons is this beautiful dress you've brought, and I'd love to ask you if you could stand so that we could see the full beauty of this traditional Indian dress known as a sari.
Yes.
And it's just absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
And you model it quite well. And this is not a dance costume necessarily.
No,
this
is an everyday costume. Well, no, you don't usually wear silk every day with gold embroidery. This would be for a dress-up party or a performance, going to any sort of concert or something like that. I would wear this kind of sari, which is made of silk and with the gold embroidery and the gold temple jewelry.
Well, it is absolutely gorgeous.
And it's stunning. 6 yards, which is just wrapped around. So the only thing that fits you is this blouse part, so you can, anybody could wear the same sari. Just drape it differently.
Well, it is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I do thank you for modeling it for us. That's really nice. It just seems so, it's very interesting that this is everyday wear or not even formal wear. But it does bring to mind the sorts of elaborate costumes that one might wear in a Hindu dance form. And now that we've seen the sari, perhaps we've got a couple of images of dancers. Maybe you could point out the difference between what you're wearing and these more elaborate dance costumes that we're reviewing now.
Yes, so a sari is just 6 yards of unstitched, uncut cloth. So in this picture, I'm wearing the sari, and my two students are wearing costumes that are made from saris. So there are pants that fit you, and then there's another part that comes across here, and you have the blouse, the same as you have for a sari. And then you have this part of the sari, the gold fancy embroidery, is made into a fan, which you'll see in the dances actually moves a lot in a very spectacular way with the dance.
Right.
And all of the pieces of the costume just completely stay in place. They don't move at all when you're dancing.
Right, and you were telling me earlier that it can take hours to prepare a costume and makeup for a dance recital. So,
yes,
yeah.
2 to 3 hours for one person.
Wow. We have a second image. One of the things that you notice about these costumes is the color. And in the second image, we actually have a group of dancers, and you can see the various colors. And I like this image because it's a formation known as the lotus, I think.
Right.
Could you speak just a little bit about that formation?
This is a dance that one of my teachers choreographed, and it's called the lotus dance. And the dancers actually move like the petals of a lotus opening and closing during the dance. In Indian thought, a lotus is a symbol for the spiritual. But it is rooted through the water and then into the mud. So, like, we're here on earth, and we grow up through our consciousness to the spiritual world. So it's kind of a symbol of spirituality.
Wow. Reaching heavenward out of the muck at the bottom of the pond, I guess. Is that it?
Rooted in the earth.
Rooted in the earth.
Toward the heavens.
Well, and this is the way you say that, and with your hand gestures, tells me a lot about how you view dance, right? So dance is movement. Dance is movement.
It's a language. And we didn't talk about this before, but there's a whole gesture language. There are 52 positions of your hands that you can be used for lots of different things, for explaining things. You can use your eyes. There are 11 positions of your eyes. So you can say, for instance, the straightforward position and the down position. So you can combine those in all sorts of different ways. You can do them to be angry, like this, or you can do them like this.
Oh, yes, all right.
Everybody knows what that is.
Right, right. So you're being very expressive with your eyes,
Right.
with your hands, and of course your entire body is moving through the dance form. We're going to watch a video in a few minutes, and maybe these are some of the things we can look for. So it's
Right.
very complicated.
It is very
what's going
complicated.
on. And you mentioned that this is sacred dance, right? This
Yes, it's evolved as part of the worship in the temples over the last 2,500 years.
Wow.
All of those hand gestures and all of those things that I was telling you about, those were written down 2,000 years ago.
So this is really one of the most ancient forms of religious ritualistic expression known to humankind.
It is.
Actually, that's incredible.
One of the most ancient living ones, particularly.
And when you say that dance is a language, and that this form of dance in particular is really enacting myth
Right.
on stage, what do you mean exactly by that?
Well, myths are stories. We act them out. I could act in the traditional Bharatanatyam, what I do, it's a solo dance form. So I would act the villain, I would act the prince, I would act the shy maiden, I would act the demon, I would act all of those different parts as I tell the story. Now we use a lot of dance dramas, so that you have one person who acts the princess, one person who acts the prince or the hero, another person who acts the god, maybe, or the goddess, and then other people who would act all the evil characters or just the regular street people.
And then these characters and these stories are actually universal stories, right? They're telling the story of universal truths that humankind has dealt with throughout its existence.
Right. So it's like what Joseph Campbell calls mythic images, that are pictures of experiences that we all have inside of us. So that the demon is not necessarily something that's outside of us. It might be some part of us, some part that we may not want to recognize and we might want to put outside of us. But if we recognize it, it actually can have positive aspects to it too. So the myths really help us to integrate our own internal life, to understand how we cope with our feelings, how we not to repress our feelings, but to recognize them, not necessarily act on them, but to recognize them and put them in place in our psyche.
So these ancient myths, the ancient stories, the religious truths, enacted through dance here. And I think Campbell's words help us live our lives, actually.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
It's really nice. And then Campbell's work was based on the work of Carl Jung.
Yes.
Jung talked about the collective unconscious.
Right.
And I think that's maybe what you were referencing there when you were talking about referencing these universal truths.
Yes. Carl Jung said, "Our outward-oriented consciousness addressed to the demands of the day may lose touch with our inner forces, that the myths, when they're properly interpreted, are the means to bring us back in touch."
So these myths are crucial, really, to healthy living,
Yes.
healthy psychological makeup and living.
Right.
So in today's contemporary world, it seems to me that maybe we're losing touch with our mythic heritage. And
We're still watching Star Wars.
okay, we're still
It's the same stories.
okay. So in our movies and in our literature,
It's everywhere. If you look for the same themes, you can find them everywhere. Joseph Campbell has one set of like a story that has like 10 different parts of the magical child. And the magical child that sort of comes to save the world. And he has found over 40 different versions of this story with all of these different images all over the world. So it's of course, the mythic child is us. It's the innocent, perfect, unblemished part of ourselves that we all identify with that magical child. And then goes through all of these trials to come to full maturity and strength.
but the mythic child is also the Buddha.
Yes,
also the Christ.
absolutely.
So these are two of those forms that Campbell talked about of
Right.
this story. And this is what dance does. It helps us to identify with and keep in touch with these universal truths that sometimes we don't understand are actually operating in our daily lives.
Right.
That's really beautiful. I would love to watch the entire dance recital video, but we don't have time for that. But I would like to watch a small clip of a dance recital that I think was performed by your students.
And myself.
And yourself, that's right. You're in the video. This is the reenactment of a sacred Hindu story. I think it has to do with the incarnations of Krishna.
Right.
10 incarnations, to be
Right.
exact. Some of the themes that come out through this dance are harmony and restoration of
Yes.
good in the world,
Yes.
balance of good and evil. I'll let you tell about it maybe as we watch it or after we're finished. But if we could
Sure.
just spend a couple of minutes watching this video and then we'll talk about it.
वेदानुद्धरति जगन्निवहति भूगोळम् उद्बिभ्रति दैत्यं दारयति बलिं छलयते क्षत्रक्षयं कुर्वते पौलस्त्यं जयते फलं कलयते कारुण्यमातन्वते म्लेच्छान्मोचयते दशाकृतिकृते कृष्णाय तुभ्यं नमः
Oh, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
I think this was a dance that lasted about 15 minutes or so.
Yes.
We saw the beginning of it. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about this introduction. I know throughout the entire sequence there are several stories that are told through the
Right.
dance movement. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what we just saw in that short clip, perhaps.
Sure. So the poetry for this dance comes from Jayadeva, who was a 14th century poet in India. And one of my teachers choreographed the dance, and I learned it right after he choreographed it, about 40 years ago. And he's 80 and still dancing, by the way.
Really?
So, but this is a poem that enumerates the 10 incarnations that Lord Krishna took to restore the balance between good and evil in the world. So the first incarnation was during the Great Flood, when demons stole the sacred books of Hinduism and threw them to the depths of the flood. So Krishna became a giant fish and dove down after them and saved them. The second story is when the gods and demons were churning the ocean of milk, the Milky Way, to extract the nectar of immortality. And as they were churning, they used the earth as a churn. As they were churning, the earth slipped and fell to the depths of the universe. So Vishnu became a tortoise and to carry its weight, like the Greek Atlas.
Right, right.
Then later on, these stories deal with hubris. So there was a king who had become extremely, extremely powerful and very proud of his generosity and considered himself to be the very acme of the perfect person. And so he was very proud of giving boons to everyone who came to him. So Krishna came in the form of a hunchback dwarf beggar. And so he had his stick and his begging bowl, and he comes in front of the king and this pathetic little guy and says, please, can I have a boon? And he says, I just want enough land that I can sit down and meditate, that nobody will chase me away. And just 3 steps, what I can cover in 3 steps. This is a little hunchback dwarf.
Sure.
And so the king says, sure, take it. So then he takes his cosmic form, and he takes the earth in 1 step, the heavens in the next step, and says, where shall I put my 3rd step? There's nothing left. And the king says, here, step on my head.
So you're in those stories right there that you told, you have hubris, like the Greek myths.
Yes.
You have the depths of chaos, like in the Jewish and Christian stories.
Right.
So you get a feel for how these universal myths and themes circulate throughout the various traditions. So it is Hindu sacred dance, and I'm sure that you do learn about the peculiarities of Hindu thought.
Yes.
But on a much grander scale, you're dealing with universal themes.
It's universal themes.
Wow, it's really spectacular.
We get really big and powerful, and we think that we're above everything, and then something has to bring us back down again.
That's right. All right, so now tell me about so you mentioned that you had been dancing this one particular form for 40 years.
This one dance, yes.
This one, but you've actually been involved with this form of dance for 50 years?
50 years,
That's
yes.
quite remarkable.
Yes.
How in the world did you get started?
My mother's an anthropologist. Anthropologists' children get very varied upbringings. So when I was 16, she had a Fulbright to do research for her dissertation in India, and I went along for the ride. And I had been very involved in dance and music, Western classical dance and music, all my life. And so my mother's advisor said, oh, well, Sheila should go to this particular school in India, and she should learn this particular kind of dance with this particular teacher, and this kind of music with this particular teacher. And I was like, whatever. It was going to be a year.
Right.
And then I was going to go back to the United States and go back to college. So after I'd been learning for about 6 months, I was like, this is it. This is what I was born for.
Right.
And
you were 16 at the time.
I was 16, yes.
Well, you had quite a mature amount of self-consciousness about yourself.
Well, I was just lucky. I really was just lucky. It just spoke to me. The whole idea, Indian thought, Indian culture. We lived in this beautiful place in the countryside in India where I could look outside my window and see 25 colors of bougainvillea, mango orchards, rice paddy. I mean, it was very idyllic. Very small private school. And with this incredibly strong arts department. And so I never wanted to leave. I had nightmares about coming back to the States.
So you obviously were greatly impacted at an early age by this culture and by the traditions, by Indian thought, as you put it, Hindu thought.
I read a lot of Hindu mythology, but I also read a lot of Rabindranath Tagore. The school had a wonderful library. So I read a lot of Tagore's work, which deals with Hindu thought, but in a very contemporary kind of way, because he was a 20th century poet.
Right.
And writer, very socially conscious, very, very idealistic writer, but beautiful poet at the same time. So that was very influential for me. And then learning the dance and learning the music, and it just felt comfortable, like home to me.
So in a sense, you've devoted your life to this Hindu philosophy or thought, but you're not Hindu.
You can't become a Hindu.
You can't become,
and I wouldn't want to, because it precludes anything else.
Right. So, there's not a sense of converting to a Hindu religion
can't.
like you think of in the West of converting from one religion
No.
to another. You can't.
No, you can't.
Right. But your study of the philosophy and the thought has greatly influenced your own outlook on life.
Absolutely. And the person that really made the connection for me was Joseph Campbell. One of my students actually introduced me to him about 35 years ago. And it was a real eye-opener because I felt sort of divided that, here I am an American, but what I really love is Hindu thought, and I've got one foot on either side of the world. This is not a comfortable way to live.
Right.
But when I started studying Joseph Campbell, and then Heinrich Zimmer, who was actually one of Campbell's contemporaries, who died young, unfortunately, and then Matthew Fox, I understand more about how these images are not unique to Hinduism. They're in the clothes of Hinduism. So, but the being of the images is the same in the Grimm's fairy tales.
Right,
It's the same as Star Wars. It's the same as, all the things that we see in our world now.
And Joseph Campbell was, well, for those who may not know, he was, I guess, the preeminent myth scholar of the 20th century.
Right.
And he was very adept at saying the things that you're saying so eloquently here, that whereas the Hindu religion might be the cultural manifestation
Right.
of these teachings, they are transcultural, across
Right.
cultures, and you find them in every culture, in every religion,
Right.
in every mode of storytelling.
Right.
Even in our movies today.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So you've made a lifetime commitment to dance, this particular form of dance, and you have founded and still, I guess, direct and
Yes.
teach in your dance school. Could you tell us a little bit about your school, how that got started? And
Yes.
Sure.
So I moved back to the States when I was 28. So I lived in India for 12 years. And I started teaching actually at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And had a few private students on the side. And then actually the private students ended up to be the much more fulfilling part of it, because university students will study for a semester or two. But this kind of dance is so complicated that it takes years and years to get proficiency.
Did you say earlier a dozen years or more?
Yes.
To just have some level of proficiency. That's
Right.
That's a
to be able
commitment.
to use the language, actually improvisation is a very big part of the dance. So you might have a storyline that the line of the song might say that Krishna showed his mother a vision of the whole universe when she looked inside his mouth. So that's all you have. And you can improvise however long you want to do to get to the part where she looks inside his mouth. So one of the ways one of my favorite ways of doing that is that he's playing with sand with all his friends, and he's like, it's kind of a naughty little mischievous little guy. And so, children sometimes put sand in their mouths, and Krishna was very famous for doing that. And so, he's like playing all these games with his friends, and then he like kind of sneaks off by himself and puts some sand in his mouth. Not bad. Put some more in. And his big brother sees him and says, okay, I'm going to go tell Mother. You did this again. You are in trouble.
Right.
So she comes and she says, open your mouth and show me. What have you done? And he says, no. Everybody's telling lies about me. I didn't do it. And then she says, no. You're the one that's telling lies. First you're eating sand and you're telling lies. Now open up or I'm going to hit you. And he goes, no, I didn't. I promise you. And so she feels sorry for him. And she picks him up and puts him on her lap and says, come on, honey, open now. And he's, no. And then, so finally, she gets really mad, and she says, I'm going to twist your ear until you open it. Like, she picks him up by his ear, and she's like, open up now. And so he opens up, and she sees this vision of the whole universe. And she sees the world and the solar system, and then she looks closer, and she sees herself and a little tiny Krishna. And so it's like, and as a mother, I have 4 children.
Right.
You have those moments all
That's
the time.
and that's all you have to go with. Everything else is improvisation.
It's
to
all
get you to that point.
improvisation.
But you have to be a master of the form.
You do. It
you have
has
to be
to be-
classically trained
Exactly.
before you can depart from the text, so to speak, and improvise that way.
So you have to improvise it. There are lots of rules of the improvisation. If you use a mudra, it has to be the correct mudra. It has to be in the right place.
Right.
You have to use your eyes the right way. You have to stay in the rhythm. It's a 7-beat song. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So
There's a lot going on.
You can't step in any other beat except 1 or 4 or 6.
So improvisation has a lot of rules, so
It
at
has
least
a
in this
lot
form.
of rules.
So and the name of your dance school is?
Natyananda.
And that means in Sanskrit?
Natya means dance, and Ananda means joy or bliss.
So dance and bliss.
Yes,
Bliss through
the
dance.
joy of dance.
Oh, that's wonderful. So if you were to, if I could ask you to say one thing about the importance of this sort of expression in our lives, what it can mean to us, how do we take something, we're obviously not all dancers, so how do we find the bliss if we can't express ourselves through dance? What advice quickly would you have for the rest of us?
I think you can watch a movie and find that. You can watch Star Wars. It stirs you. That's why it's so popular. My grandsons love it.
Right.
Their parents love it. I love it. It's that seeing the truth behind things really helps you appreciate it more. So it might be Macbeth. It might be Othello. It might be Blake. It might be
All the beautiful things we bring into our lives.
We have all these wonderful art forms.
Right.
You don't have to do it to have that joy and that bliss. You can appreciate it by seeing it, by hearing it. Music, my gosh.
Wow. Well, that's a beautiful thought, really, to end on.
It's for anybody.
I want to thank you for bringing beauty and bliss into our studio today. Thank you.
It's been really a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure for me as well. Thank you. Well, that's Religion and Life for this week. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions, please contact us at watchapptv.com. Until next time, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt.